10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome to the John DiVito Show. Today we're going to be interviewing Glenn from the Glike Beldner Sports Show and also formerly of the Random Couple Show. So sit back and enjoy, and we're going to be getting going in a few minutes talking about some of the current events before we go to Glenn. Hope everyone is having a happy Monday. All right, everybody, welcome to the John DiVito Show. It is Monday, a little bit shy of 12 o'clock, so we're getting going a couple minutes early. Hey, Eric, welcome to the show. Mister, welcome. Eric, if you want to call in, please do so and share my live and do all that good stuff. So before we get started today, we're going to be interviewing Glenn from the Glike Beldner Sports Show. And for those of you that don't know that show, it's a very good sports show that's recorded by Glenn, who used to be one of the people that ran the Random Couple Show on Podbean. So Glenn has been around Podbean for a long time. I've gotten to know him really well. He's a great guy, so I'm kind of excited to learn more about him today. But before we get started, today is obviously a pretty important day in Podbean history. And Eric, if you could, man the chat for me, because I'm going to get off my screen and go over to another screen so I can actually read this. Now, today is December 7th. And, for all of us today, even myself, we all think about the September 11th attacks on our country as being the worst attack, the terrorist attack that we've ever experienced. But, the generation before us, the boomers and the people of like my father's age, again, they had to live through the attack on Pearl Harbor. And, Pearl Harbor was a huge, huge, huge day. And Franklin, Delano Roosevelt, proclaimed December 7th, 1941, a day which will live in infamy because of the ramifications this day had on our country. So December 7th, 1941, it was a Sunday. So the Japanese chose that day in particular because they knew that it was a Sunday and, a lot of the servicemen and servicewomen would be at mass. They wouldn't be at full force. So this was a strategic attack on a Sunday of Hawaii when they came in and attacked Pearl Harbor. So the attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise military strike by Imperial Japanese Navy Air Services among the United States, who was a neutral country at that time, against the naval base at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, which is a territory of Hawaii. It happened just before 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. The attack led to the United States' formal entry into World War II the next day. The Japanese military leadership referred to the attack as the Hawaii Operation and Operation AI and Operation Z during its planning. Japan attended the attack as a preventative action to keep the United States Pacific Fleet from entering with its planned military actions in Southeast Asia against overseas territories of the UK, the Netherlands, and the United States. Over the course of 7 hours, there were coordinated Japanese attacks on the U.S.-held Philippines, Guam, Wake Island, the British Empire in Malaysia, and Hong Kong. The attack commenced at 7:48 a.m. Hawaiian time. The base was attacked by 353. Think about that number, 353 Imperial Japanese aircraft, including fighters, level and dive bombers, and torpedo bombers in 2 waves, launching also from 6 separate aircraft carriers. Of the 8 U.S. Navy battleships present, all were damaged, with 4 of them being sunk. All but the USS Arizona was later raised, and 6 were returned to service and went on to fight in the war. The Japanese also sank or damaged 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, an anti-aircraft training ship, and 1 mine layer. A total of 188 U.S. aircraft were destroyed. 2,403 Americans were killed, and 1,178 others were wounded. So important base installations such as, the power station, dry dock, shipyard, maintenance, and fuel and torpedo storage facilities, as well as the submarine piers and headquarters buildings were all attacked. Japanese losses were light. They only lost 29 aircrafts and 5 submarines, and they had 64 servicemen killed. So by doing this, Japan attacked the United States. At that point, it was the greatest, single attack on our grounds that we've ever seen until the September 11th terrorist attacks happened. So, for those of you that don't think a lot about Pearl Harbor Day and think about December 7th, I mean, this was an immense day in American history where we were attacked. We were brought into a world war. Over 2,400 Americans were killed. Another almost 1,200 were injured. So today, as you're looking at December 7th and you're thinking about what this day means, I mean, think about it on the scale of, 9/11. It was a surprise attack. And this was an attack that defined a whole generation, in this country. So, if you happen to see an old service member, if you see one of those old guys in their military garb, I mean, remember that these gentlemen at the time, I don't think there were women, were serving their country. They were attacked on a Sunday morning, and many people were killed. And so many of these heroes fought in World War II for our freedom. So I just wanted to kind of give, before I get started today, kind of like a proper introduction, to the show, and talk a little bit about, December 7th and the attacks on our country that year. So today is that day where we're talking about the attacks at Pearl Harbor. And I just wanted to kind of pay respect to all the soldiers that were wounded, killed, and then others who were brought into the war to, preserve our freedom in this country. So moving on from that, we have got my man Glenn in the studio. Glenn, if you could call in. Eric, if you want, please call in. I'm going to be interviewing the one and the only Glenn today from the Glike Beldner Sports Show. And welcome, Glenn. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, John?
Doing fantastic. How's life up north in the North Country, up in Canada?
Well, it's actually been pretty tame weather-wise in the last little bit. Beginning of November, we got like 3 feet of snow overnight, so that was a bit annoying. But it's been pretty tame. It hasn't been too cold so far.
Yeah, we got a good storm over the weekend. We got about a foot of snow on Saturday, which was kind of good. My kids went snowboarding yesterday, and my wife went skiing, and I'm going to probably go tomorrow. So, it's kind of cool to get the snow. For me, I like the snow at this time of year. Come April, at that point, I'm kind of done with snow and winter and all that crap, by then. So the first few snows of the year are always nice, though.
Well, I don't mind the snow, except when it comes in like 3-foot piles at the same time, because it's a little treacherous out there when you got snow up to your knees when you're trying to go just to a vehicle.
We had 1 year here where it was, I think, the month of February, and I think the winter, we ended up that year with almost 12 feet of snow where I live, and they literally had to call in the National Guard because there was no place left to put the snow. It was stacked so high on the sides of the roads. We had to have our roof shoveled off, and our kids were sledding off the roof of the house and all that stuff. It was just a crazy winter. But you're right. When you get those 3-foot poundings of snow, those are kind of tough to live with. But hey, we live in the North Country, so that's kind of what we're used to up here. You Southerners like Eric, who lives in Georgia, I think if the temperature gets down into the 50s, you're getting chilly. Up here, that's springtime for us, in Massachusetts. Hey, man, listen, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your sports show. So what's up with this new sports show you've got going on? I know you've been at it for a little bit now. And what gave you the idea to switch over? Because you had the Random Couple show here on Podbean. What made you start a sports show, and what's the show all about?
Well, the Glike Beldner Sports Show is a sports show that originated. Well, the name originated back when me and Mike, my co-host, we were like 21, and we loved playing the GM mode on like NHL games and MLB games. And so like it would show up like, oh, who's the general manager name? And we're like, well, what do we call him? And we're like, Glike Beldner. And we just kind of basically mashed up our names together. We're like, good. So then, Random Couple Show was great. It was fun. It was essentially a way for me to learn how to podcast, because I think I recorded myself 3 times before I went live the first time, and then it just kind of took off. And I always loved sports. That's always been my
off. I mean, the Random Couple Show was very popular. You guys were on the leaderboard.
Yeah.
Podbean. It was a very popular show. That did very well for quite some time.
It was great for a few months, but it had nothing to do with sports. And I love sports. I love talking about sports. It's one of my main hobbies to pay attention to is read sports articles and look up sports. And so eventually, kind of when Random Couple Show was kind of like, I was just not really that interested anymore, kind of tried out doing the sports podcast with my buddy Mike. We tried it once. We both loved it. And so we kind of kept it going. It's a lot hockey centric for the most part. Whereas being in Canada, we're mainly hockey fans, but we do pay attention to basketball, NFL, MLB. So we kind of dive into all of them and have some fun while we're doing it. Yeah, it's fun. We enjoy it. I got my workplace to sponsor the show, which is pretty cool. So we got like free cheesecake the one week, and we did like a taste tester of this like caramel cinnamon toast cheesecake, which is delicious.
Sounds good. Send some my way. That sounds pretty good, man. So NHL. So who's your team? What team do you like in the NHL? Who's your favorite team? And what do you think is going to happen this upcoming season? I'm a Bruins fan, and I would admit that hockey is probably a little bit lower on my, list of sports that I like. I mean, for me, I'm probably baseball first, then I would say football, then probably hockey, basketball after that. But I am a Bruins fan, and they're a decent team. Do you think they have a chance to win the whole thing this year, or probably not?
Well, I'm a Leafs fan, John. So the Bruins aren't really high on my list of teams I like, but the Bruins will do okay. I think they'll be decent. They're going to have to look at rebuilding here in the near future with Zdeno Chara getting up there in age, Bergeron and Krejci both being kind of getting to close to their mid-30s. They do have some young players coming up. They have that DeBrusque kid. He's looked pretty good. Pasternak, he's young and he's good. So, I mean, the Bruins will be competitive. I think their management has done a good job of having a mix of youth and veteran players on the team. Tuukka Rask well, hopefully he actually plays because he kind of bailed on you guys last year.
He totally did. Yeah, and the Boston fans are pretty fickle, so that people weren't happy that he bailed. I could say that.
Yeah, Boston fans do have a tendency to blow their lid when something happens in sports that they don't particularly like.
Well, so how about your Maple Leafs? How are they looking for this year? Do you think they have a shot at winning the title, or?
Well, with the NHL this year, just with the fact that we still have COVID-19 kind of going on and Canada hasn't had its borders open, they're actually looking at a Canadian division. So there's 7 teams in the NHL, and all 7 of those teams will be playing in one division in Canada and not traveling into the States. They'll be just traveling throughout Canada because they can't leave the border.
Right.
And so 6 out of the 7 Canadian teams are actually very competitive teams, other than the Ottawa Senators, but nobody cheers for the Ottawa Senators, so that's okay. And all 6 are very competitive, so there's a very good chance that their season could be very tough. And so it wouldn't be a shock to me if the Leafs end up finishing first and doing well in the playoffs. It also wouldn't shock me if the Leafs didn't do very good and end up missing the playoffs. It's just kind of one of those years. I don't know what's going to happen with it. It's going to be so different seeing an all-Canadian division. It's going to be different not seeing the Bruins come into town, not seeing the Flyers or the Penguins or any of those teams coming into town. It's going to be very weird because you're looking at a 48-game season, maybe 52 games, and the fact that American teams aren't going to be playing the Canadian teams predominantly for most of the year. And will there be fans? So it's going to be very interesting to see what's going to happen with the NHL this year, actually.
It's strange, isn't it? I mean, but the way 2020's been, it's going to stretch into 2021. Hopefully at some point we'll get back into some type of sense of normal for regular life and sports, but who knows when that's going to happen. But hey, listen, we all know you from, again, the Random Couple Show. We know you from the Glike Beldner Sports Show, but what we want to learn today is a little bit more about Glenn the person. So I'm going to ask you some questions, just kind of answer them the best you can, and we'll just kind of maybe go off into some tangents and whatever else as we do the interview. But I guess the first thing is, everybody out there, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Glenn? What's your life like? You live in the Toronto area. Tell us about Glenn.
I'm actually not from Toronto. I'm from Dick Pearson, Canada. So I live in a town in the middle of Canada called Prince Albert. So Dick Pearson.
How far is that from Toronto?
So I think it's about a 24-hour drive. Where I'm located is kind of just above North Dakota, so it's right in the middle of the prairies.
Okay. Wow.
Essentially, if you look like a map of Canada and like did like a rough guess of where the middle is, that's basically where I am.
Hmm. Now, how'd you become a Maple Leafs fan being that far away from Toronto?
Generational fandom. I think my great grandfather was one of the engineers that helped build Maple Leaf Gardens back in like 1918. So then, like, he was a Maple Leafs fan because during that time is the Depression. So instead of like actually paying the money, they just gave him season tickets. So like the family got season tickets for the rest of generations to come. They got 2 season tickets, which are no longer in the family because I think there were some addictions that were sold for whatever, you know.
Yeah.
That's just been passed down. When I was young, I actually did try becoming a Philadelphia Flyers fan because I was a huge Lindros fan back in the early or late 90s.
He's a great hockey player.
So I tried that, except then the Leafs ended up playing the Flyers in the first round. The Leafs won, and my dad would not let me hear the end of it for a couple months till I decided that, you know what, I'll just come back to the Leafs because this is a pain.
I remember being a young Red Sox fan, and I walked into a sports shop with my father. I don't remember how old I was. I was young. I was probably 8, 9 years old. And I walked by a rack, and I saw a Yankee shirt. And I remember looking at my dad going, "Hey, Dad." And I was completely serious. I was like, "Dad, can I get that shirt?" He looked at me with just this look of disgust. And he looked at me and said, "Son, no child of mine will ever wear a Yankee shirt. So no, you can't have it." I remember at that point, it was pretty clear I was on the Red Sox side of things in the whole Red Sox Yankees rivalry. But it's funny how sometimes parents will kind of let you know, now this is kind of the team we root for in this house, and kind of set that standard, which is funny.
Well, I know my sister. She's a teacher now, but and she's in French immersion, so she teaches like French class basically. Well, she teaches like the entire class in French. It's like having Spanish school in the States, maybe. I'm not sure if you guys have that. But anyway, so she had to go to Quebec, the French part of Canada, for I think 2 school years to do the internship in order to be qualified for that particular position. So she goes to Quebec, meets this young boy, becomes a Montreal Canadiens fan, sends a picture of her at a Montreal Canadiens game wearing a Montreal Canadiens jersey.
Oh boy.
My dad texts her back, "What an ugly fucking jersey."
I love it. That's great. Well, I still remember as a young guy going up to Quebec and went to Montreal several times with friends. This is when I was in my early 20s. And it was amazing to me that if you were asking a girl a very simple question about, how are directions to get to this place, or what's a good thing to eat here, they would respond back and ask in English. But if you went out at night and you tried to pick up one of these same girls, all of a sudden they didn't speak English. So I remember it was kind of funny where, so they know how to turn off that English thing really quickly if they didn't want to talk to you, which I remember being pretty funny. But
I know just even in like working in the restaurant industry, and there being a lot of people kind of brought in from different countries that maybe their English isn't that great. When everything's going great, their English is just perfectly fine. As soon as you try and tell them something they're doing wrong, it's, "I don't understand."
That's exactly what we got. Hey, how do you get to this place? Oh, you just take a left over here, you take a right. Hey, would you like to dance? I don't understand English. It was like, all right, what happened? I don't know what the hell happened there. But and that's when I pull out my old voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir and get a slap across the face. At that point, it had never worked out for me. But so
that never fails to be an issue.
It never worked. But if I threw it out there every now and then, and it obviously never worked. But now in the area of Canada you grew up in, I imagine you must have played hockey as a kid, right? It's such a big sport in Canada. You must have played.
Well, actually, I never played. I was always just a fan. I'm not sure if you're aware of how kind of hockey works when it comes to pricing or whatever, but it's very expensive to have a child in hockey. In Canada, you're looking at probably $20,000 a kid per season.
Wow.
That's like the type. That's just like buying the equipment. That's like you bought the equipment. That was a couple of grand, and then it's like $18,000 in different league fees and ice fees and all these other different fees. So it's extremely expensive. My parents were never the types that wanted to spend that type of excessive money for a kid that was never going to make the NHL. I mean,
money. I had no
it's
idea.
great to have dreams for your. It's nice to have dreams for your kid, but ultimately, like if you're looking at spending $20,000-$30,000 per year just for a kid to play hockey, it's like, you know what? He can. I'll buy him a stick. I'll get him a net, and he can go out on the street and he can play it there because that's about good enough for me.
Well, I grew up in New Hampshire, and hockey was pretty big in New Hampshire, and I had a lot of friends that played on competitive teams. Now, I was a baseball, basketball, football player, so I never really played hockey, but I would go out and play pond hockey, and I was terrible. I couldn't skate. I had weak ankles, so I was either the goalie or a defenseman because I couldn't skate backwards. I just wasn't good. I had my friends like just skating circles around me because they were just awesome hockey players, but I always wished I had been a better, hockey player. So when my kids were little, I took them down for skating lessons, and none of them liked it. So none of my kids really liked skating. So, my boys have played everything else but hockey for the most part, but they do have a lot of friends that play hockey in our area because hockey obviously is pretty big in Massachusetts. And I had no idea it cost that much because I know I've got friends who they have, 2-3 kids playing hockey. So that's just crazy money to have to spend.
I'm not sure if it's as expensive in the States. It might be a little cheaper. I know there's a lot of sports teams that are big into funding minor league hockey in the States, just with, not being as big everywhere. That a lot of the NHL teams, part of their deal when they're in the cities is kind of providing a grassroots program for hockey. So like you'll see the Dallas Stars down in obviously Dallas.
Yeah.
But just kind of in that area, they've started their own minor league, their own like grassroots hockey thing, like starting at 5-6 years old. They now have a league that they built up that they funded for kids playing hockey. So there might be a little more help that way. I know in the last 10 years, there's been Let's Play initiatives in Canada. So there's been more initiatives to where different corporations are funding kids to play hockey that in most cases wouldn't be able to afford to play hockey. So it's kind of like for the families that are, living closer to the poverty line, that kid's never going to be able to play hockey. The parents can never afford it. They couldn't even buy the equipment. Well, that's how expensive it is. So there is more initiatives like that. But I mean, even when there was a lot of things going on in the world in terms of social justice issues, the NHL got thrown down, or hockey in general basically got thrown in the gutter a lot as being kind of an elitist sport.
Yeah.
Which ultimately it is. It is. It's like you don't see a whole lot of people people in hockey that came from poverty. A lot of them are very well to do.
With that whole thing though, too, again, I don't want to go in this direction, but honestly, I think some leagues, I did respect the fact that some leagues didn't want to get in the middle of politics, because I look at sports as being something where you get away from real life. I mean, I love watching baseball. I love watching football. Those are my sports. And, I don't want to be bludgeoned over the head with political issues while I'm trying to enjoy something that's supposed to be a recreational activity. So I do appreciate the fact that maybe they didn't get involved, I guess, as much. But let me if you didn't play hockey as a kid, what type of things were you into? Were you involved in other sports? Were you not a sports guy? What did you do growing up for like activities?
Well, I did play other sports. I played soccer. I used to play soccer for a while. I played softball for a little bit. I played basketball and volleyball in school. Curling, being in Canada, that was a big thing, and I was actually pretty good at curling.
I've always wanted to try that. Curling was awesome. Are you a good curling player?
I was back in high school. We went to provincials twice, which basically like beat states in the States. So yeah, I was pretty good. It was fun. Nice little. It was like every the tournaments were on the weekend, so you'd play 3-4 games on Saturday, a couple on Sunday, and make $50 and go home.
I'll tell you.
So yeah, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. It's a lot more complicated than it looks, and not nearly as easy as maybe you would think it is.
I bet it's hard. I mean, I've been watching. I love watching that anytime it's on. And for me, there's a place I think like an hour away from where I live where they actually teach you how to curl. And I was thinking that would be a lot of fun to learn how to do that. But I can't imagine I'd be the guy that would. Now, what is it called? The curling device that you throw? I don't even know what it's called.
A rock.
The rock.
A rock.
Well, I can't imagine I'd be the guy throwing the rock because I can't get down in that position. So I'd probably be one of the guys with the little squeegees that kind of like runs like crazy. tries to
Well, actually,
pick up the speed and slow it down. But if you could, I mean, tell us some of the strategy of curling. I'd be interested in the history of that.
have you ever played shuffleboard? It's essentially,
You still
if
there?
you play shuffleboard, it's essentially, yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah.
Shuffleboard and curling are essentially the same thing. It's just shuffleboard's on ground, whereas curling's on the ice. So it's essentially the same premise. You kind of got a bullseye, and the idea is to get in the middle. Except in curling, they put like little water pellets across the ice, which they call pebble. And so the rock is kind of just sitting on like a razor edge, kind of on the bottom. It doesn't really. It's not like the whole thing sitting on the bottom. It's just kind of like tiny outside line. And so when you spin it, because it's on all these like little water pebbles, it curls, hence curling. So you can throw it like way over here, and depending on it, you can actually make it go on the completely other side of the ice.
Nice. Now, is that an expensive sport to get into?
Very cheap, actually. I think it was like $40 a year.
Nice. No, I really want to try that. That's one of those things that's on my bucket list where I want to go out at least to try it once to see if I enjoy it, and then decide from there, if I want to play again or not. But that's kind of cool that you did that. So now, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's very enjoyable as an adult after like a few beers and just not caring how good you are. Because if you start caring how good you are, it can be very depressing very quickly. Because it does take a long time to get less than shitty.
So
like
now,
golf in a way.
Like that, you have places like that where you go out, you drink beer, and you can curl.
Yeah, it's like most men's leagues are curling, or just kind of it's basically a beer. It's the beer leagues of curling. It's like you have a beer before the game, and you play the game. You take a break, you have a beer, you go back, finish the game, and then you go back and sit down and have a few more beer.
Yeah, see, where I live, I don't think we have anything like that. So that's why to hear that, that's kind of cool. So it's almost similar to going like a bowling alley. You go and you play your game, you drink some beer. That's awesome. I would love to be able to do that. Who knows? Maybe they'll take off in the U.S. at some point, but that's pretty cool. So now, are you a married guy? Married, kids, anything like that, or are you playing the field?
Not married. I'm single and have one 9-year-old son.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. He really, 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 really wants to be a cop. It's been an addiction of his for 4 years.
Huh. Now, do you have any police in your family or any cops in your family? Or was it just something he wanted to do on his own?
That was entirely built up in his own little mind. I think there's a YouTuber or something that does like this, like he's like a bail bondsman or something that he watches, and I think that's kind of where he got it from. And then he's been like every Halloween he's been a cop since he's been about 4.
It's funny how some people just know. Yeah, I know my daughter my wife talks about it. When she was young, she knew from the time she was a little girl she wanted to be in healthcare. So really, she never had any doubt, never had anything else she wanted to do. That was kind of the focus she had from the time she was little, and went after that, ended up doing it for a career. So it's kind of funny. I never had that. I changed my mind like every 5 minutes as to what I wanted to be. Growing up. So I'm still that way now, definitely I guess an older ADHDer, today and my whole life, I guess. But, it's cool that he kind of knows, what he wants to be. Now, does that concern you at all? I mean, obviously he's still young, but if you're going to be a police officer, it's a dangerous way to make a living. Does that concern you about him going into that field of work, or do you think it's a great thing that he's going to, go in that direction if he decides to?
I mean, it's entirely his choice. If he's driven to be a cop, that's just what he's going to do, and good on him. I'll support him that way. I know kind of just in him playing cop, I've had to have a few discussions with him on what it means to be a cop, because there was a few times where he would be doing something that I look over and go, you know what, he can't be doing that. That just doesn't look good. I know there was one day I went over and he was playing with a cat, a legitimate cat, and he had like these popsicle sticks in his hand. I looked, and he'd like sharpened the one end. He like taken like scissors or something and cut it so it like came to a point. And I looked at it. I was like, "No, you can't do this. This is a jailhouse shit. This is what criminals use.
Can't be doing that.
No.
Oh my God. Well, now did you hear
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, we have a little bit of a delay, so it's kind of I speak and I can hear you afterwards. But now, did I tell you the story about what happened with my boys a couple nights ago? Did you hear what they did in the house?
No, I haven't heard that story yet.
Okay. Well, my boys figured out that they could blow an aerosol can into a lighter, and they were literally shooting like flame balls in my kitchen. So my wife starts yelling at the kids, and I'm just like, guys, you come out, you can't have like balls of fire shooting out of an aerosol can in the house. You're going to burn the house down. So you never know what decisions young kids or boys or whatever are going to make. So yeah, I feel your pain with that. And it's you look at the kids when they do that, and you're just like, dudes, what the hell were you thinking? And my 14-year-old son afterwards is like, Dad, why do you always yell at me? I'm like, why do I always yell at you? You were shooting flame balls across the kitchen. You could have burned our house down. Not a good decision, man. So you never know what you're going to get with kids.
It's like you at some point as a parent, you're like, how have you guys not figured this out? This was not a good idea ahead of time. Like, how have I failed you as a parent? Like, what's going on? What made you think this is a smart plan? Oh, did we lose John?
Oh, sorry. Did you hear me? I didn't hear what you said. It looks like I lost you for a second.
Yeah, we did. I was saying that you almost feel in those kind of scenarios like, how have I failed you as a parent where you thought that was a good idea?
Exactly. It's so true. So now, how long have you been podcasting for?
For the first time I ever attempted it, I'm coming up on 1 year.
1 year. Wow. And what made you decide to start podcasting? Why did you want to try this?
Well, at that time, I think I was thinking that I have like a lot of things that I'd like to say, and maybe other people seem to find me funny. So I'm like, hey, maybe if I did a podcast, people would like it. So then I decided to try it, and then I was kind of like unable to talk for more than about 4 minutes before I'd like run out of things to say, and I'm like, wow, it doesn't really take very long to get through 4 minutes of talking. But anyway, so then I'm like, well, I'll get my former co-host because we were dating at the time, Christina. So I talked to her on the phone, and then she's like, "I sound so cringy when I'm on the phone, and you're trying to record it off like a pair of headphones." And so that it's like, well, like Podbean has live, so then that's kind of how random couple show started. Is like, well, let's go live and see if there other people have stuff to talk about, so we don't have to actually come up with topics.
Right. It does help. It does make it easier when you have other people coming in and talking and typing, but also sometimes it's distracting. Also, I battle with, looking down at the chat, and then sometimes you're thinking about that and you kind of lose your train of thought as to what you're speaking about in the conversation. And I still remember the first time I went live, I didn't even know people were going to come in. I didn't even know what it was. I got on the Podbean and we turned it on. I think I was on with my son and we were just talking, and all of a sudden we see people coming in and we're like, is that person actually in here? We didn't even know what was going on when we first started doing it. So we didn't bother just recording to practice in the beginning. We just kind of jumped right in, not knowing what we were doing. And I'd be afraid to even go back and listen to those first few shows because I'm sure they were pretty horrible listening to them now. But you've been very successful, and you did the Random Couple show for quite a while, and that was now mostly about like sexual content and things like that. What other things did you talk about on that show?
That show was honestly about everything. We dealt with social issues. We had one listener who is a psychologist, and so he would come in and he would like throw out emails of people that he got, and so we talk about those issues. It's like, I got this email, and this lady says that she's still in love with her high school sweetheart who she just reconnected with a couple days ago, but she still loves her husband. What should she do? And so we talk about that, and then yeah, we did get sexual sometimes. It was we always had the joke that we were always 3 degrees to anal sex. That was kind of like the running joke. It doesn't matter where it started. 3 degrees later, we could be at the anal sex. We created the Hood Justice League, which was like the league of like rejected superheroes. So it was like we'd ask everybody, it's like, okay, come up with like a really bad superhero name and a really bad superhero power, like a power that nobody's ever going to accept. Like Superman's going to tell you, get the hell out. Batman's going to say, nope, don't come here. And so then we kind of created that. That was kind of a fun shtick. And later on it got kind of sexual or whatever. But we kind of talked about everything. We kind of said that. I think I did like an ad when Podgod was still around that he played that like Random Couple Show is the show where the audience were the show. So it's like the audience are really the stars. Because for the most part, we just kind of like engaged the audience. We didn't actually have it much to say ourselves. It was like, oh, what's everybody else talking about? So essentially, most half the show is us reading comments.
Well, that's kind of like almost like what Chuck and Billy do with their new podcast now. The not your cup of tea thing. The audience is kind of like a participant, and without the audience, the show doesn't go. So that's kind of cool that was like the focus. Now, Eric also mentioned. I remember once you roasted me. You did a lot of comedy roasts also and things like that, right?
I think that was honestly the last time I called into your show was when I roasted you on Canada Day.
It was funny. You actually kicked my ass.
Yeah.
It was funny, man.
Yeah, I know Brian on Planet HD. I roasted him on Random Couple Show, and he still considers it the greatest thing to ever happen to him on Podbean.
He's awesome. I'd love his show. I got to get him on. I'd like to have him on too and talk to him a little bit because he's got a really.
Yeah, man, Rebecca.
Yeah, you mentioned his show is one of your favorite shows. And it really is a very good show. And he's a straight talking guy, talks about a lot of different interesting things. Now, would you consider reviving the Random Couple Show at any point, or is that thing just in the rearview mirror and you're going to focus on sports from this point on?
Maybe not focus on sports. And I've had a hankering to go live at some point in the future. I'm not sure who with. I'm not sure what exactly I would be going live with or about. I think it would probably be more like as probably roasty kind of stuff because I think that'd be kind of fun to like do come get roasted show. But then again, it's kind of hard to make fun of people if you don't know them.
Yeah, it's true too.
So, but I don't think I might do sports, but at the same time, just because Random Couple Show never ever follows me around, and it might draw some people that still don't like Random Couple Show into the show, and I don't really feel like dealing with that.
I know. Well, I think any show that gets popular, you start having people that come in and troll you a little bit, and that's kind of part of the deal with having a popular show. And it's funny because you think to yourself, when those people come in, you're not going to let it bother you, but it does bother you when you have people come in and they're just mean for no reason. But I guess that's part of going live, and that's why sometimes, like recently, I've been doing some podcasts where I'm not going live and I just record shows and drop them. And I kind of enjoy doing that sometimes because then you don't have to worry about, everybody coming into the room. You just kind of talk about what you want to talk about and get that out there. But definitely, I would say that 30 minutes goes a lot slower when you're alone as opposed to having someone calling in and people, in the room chatting and all that good stuff. So it's definitely, I think there are positive things, either way. Now, what do you do for like a regular job? Do you work outside of the podcast? Like you said, your company sponsored your sports show. Like what do you do in your day-to-day living?
I'm a cook chef, so I work at a small locally owned bistro. It's kind of like we have fancy coffees and stuff, but then also we have like prime rib night and wing night and fully licensed, and we do like higher end stuff. So like you call in and you want to have like steak and lobster with like 3 different appetizers and salads and soups and this and that. You can do that. It's going to cost you $100 a plate, but you can do that too. So, I do that. I'm back to 3 days a week just because where I am now, COVID is spiking. So instead of dealing with it in March, I'm now dealing with it in December again. So that's what I do. I cook and watch sports, I guess.
Or did you just learn on your own? I mean, did you go to a culinary school or how'd you learn how to cook? Good enough to be in a restaurant, obviously.
Well, I had my first job was actually at a gas station. It was a family-owned place. Then I got let go because I was running a tab on 5-cent candies, which other people were that were related to the owners. But because they were related to the owners, that was okay. And because I wasn't, it wasn't. So anyway, I lost that job. And then I had a buddy that was dishwashing at this restaurant. And he's like, hey, I can get you a job. So I'm like, cool. I could use weed money. And so I went and did it. And then I started dishwashing, and all of a sudden I'm kind of like, eventually I got pretty good at it, had nothing else going on, so I just kind of watched people cooking, and I seen pan on fire, and I'm like, I want to do that. And so, yeah, it was my interested in making pans on fire that I guess drew me into it. And then I just had a good palate, I guess. So when I cooked, I guess it tasted good and people enjoy it, so I've stuck with it.
That's great. Now, you mentioned something even more important. You mentioned weed money. Now, is weed legal in Canada or is it illegal?
Nationally wide, it is legal, so you can buy it coast to coast. There's nothing wrong with it. Although you are still not allowed to drive, it is still considered to be uh, inebriating. So if you smoke, you can't smoke a joint and drive. You can't eat a couple gummy bears and drive, just like you can't have 6 beer and drive. Same rules apply. So, but I haven't really heard too many people that have been abusing that or getting pulled over for being high and driving. So I don't know.
I remember, I think it was in my 20s, I made the bad decision of driving on weed. And, it was funny because I'm on the highway and I felt like I was going about 90 miles an hour. And I looked down at my speedometer. I think I was going like 40 miles an hour. So that's the one thing about on weed. You don't tend to be, I think, as reckless as in a car. But yeah, I mean, we have the same laws here. I mean, obviously, you probably know not all the states are legal now, but in Massachusetts, it is legal, and California or other places, Colorado, and I think our country's going in that direction also. And for me, I'm definitely a guy that enjoys either my gummy bear, and for the first time, I actually got a chocolate bar. So you get like little pieces of chocolate, and those are pretty good. I don't smoke weed as much anymore, but definitely the edibles are kind of the way I like to go. But it's a little bit different. I don't know if you feel that way, but when you try an edible versus smoking, it's a kind of a different type of high, really. When you smoke, it's like bam, right away.
Personally, edibles don't actually really do anything for me. I could eat like a whole edible chocolate bar, other than just feeling like I ate a chocolate bar. It doesn't actually do anything for me. I pretty much have to smoke it for it to be effective. So yeah, I mean, it is different. I know a lot of people prefer it. Other people don't. I know there's a lot of older people that are just getting into trying edibles for the first time, that are getting way too screwed up and blacking out because they ate one, or 5 minutes later after a beer, they're like, oh, this didn't do crap. I'm going to have another one. And,
Now, when you
15
say
minutes after that, they're dead.
older people, what ages are you talking about? And be careful here.
Mid 50s, early 60s.
Jesus. All right, I'm 52, so I guess I'm in that category of older people. I got it. I get where you're going.
But yeah, I give you a little more. I give you a little more credit, John. I give you a little more credit.
Well, I'm 52 with the maturity level of like a 16-year-old, so I guess it works for me, But it's true. I mean, the good thing about pot, I mean, with alcohol, you go into a bar like I did back in the days, you'd have fights all the time, people getting into trouble. Basically, when people smoke weed, maybe you get into a fight over like a bag of chips or candy or something like that. But for the most part, you're pretty chill, when you smoke pot, as opposed to drinking and other things like that. So for me, I think out of the two, alcohol and weed, I think weed is the lesser evil than alcohol in a lot of cases. Because I mean, alcohol really destroys people's lives. I don't see weed doing the same thing. And I really don't think it's like a gateway to other drugs like some people say. I'm not sure how you feel about that, or if you have strong feelings either way. But I'm always someone that felt like, pot should be legal. And I'm kind of glad it's going in that direction now in the U.S.
For me, I kind of find that since Canada's legalized weed, high school kids aren't that interested in it, because now it's just something that's around. I mean, the parents have weed lying around now. It's illegal. It's not something that's taboo where you have to hide it. So the kids aren't looking at weed as like, oh, that rebellious thing to do anymore. So I mean, I'm seeing like more people kind of in their late 40s, early 50s, a couple years after it's been legal, saying, I never ever tried it when I was 20 because, it was illegal. I didn't want to get caught. I didn't want to go to jail. Now it's legal. I wouldn't mind trying it. So I bet you're actually seeing more kind of like older people that, live the majority of their lives with it being illegal, trying pot for the first time and then going driving because they're like, oh, it's just weed. It's not a big deal. It's legal. Nobody's ever killed anyone driving on weed. And so like you're seeing more older people abusing it and being probably irresponsible and driving on it. And our younger kids, the younger kids are like, whatever.
Yeah, you're probably right. That makes sense, because you're right. I think that's now for me. I still feel like when I go to the dispensary, I feel like I'm doing something naughty. Because you go in there and for my whole life it's been illegal, and now you walk into the store and you just feel like you're doing something wrong. So I guess for me now it's still about being rebellious, but. I'm happy it's legal. Hopefully it continues to go that way. And you're probably right about the teenagers. Once it becomes legal, then they lose their interest and they want to move on to something else. I guess it's more rebellious.
Yeah, it's just like not that cool anymore. It's like, well, I mean, everybody smokes weed. What do I care if I smoke weed? And now just kind of with all the kids kind of being so health conscious, I find like everybody wants to eat like 0 carbs, no gluten, no fat, yada yada yada. Make sure I work out every day. I mean, the side effects of weed isn't something that kids really, a lot of the younger people want nowadays. You know, they want to work out, they want to go for their run. You know, smoking a joint, going to buy 3 bags of chips and 6 cheeseburgers and eating all those and passing out for 4 hours. This doesn't sound like a good time anymore.
They don't know what they're missing. Oh my God. But I got to tell you a funny story. I got to tell you a little bit of a funny story. And I don't know if you guys know this, but back when I first started doing this podcast, I had a couple sex-based shows, and they were pretty good shows. They were pretty popular. Still, if I look back, I got a ton of downloads on those shows when I published them. But one of the main reasons why I decided to stop doing those, I don't even think I've ever shared this story, but you know, in my town where I live, I'm a father of 4, as you all know. I've talked about it incessantly, but I've been a baseball coach, a softball coach, a basketball coach, a football coach. I've literally at one time coached almost every kid in our town. You know, they're in the 4 years of, or the age spans of my 4 kids. So recently, this past summer, I'm driving to baseball practice with a group of kids in my car, young boys, probably, 10, 11, 12 years old. I'm not going to mention names because there are people in my town that listen to the show, obviously, because of this story. So I'm in my car driving to baseball, again, not thinking anything about anyone in town ever listening to me getting on and doing this little podcast. So all of a sudden, the one kid in the back goes, "Hey, Coach DiVito." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I listened to your podcast." And I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "How did you find that?" He goes, "Well, someone told me about it and I searched for it and I found the podcast, and I'll tell you, you do a pretty good job. And I have to say that my favorite show was probably your sex podcast." And at that, this kid's 10 or 11 years old. So I look back, I'm like, "You listen to my sex podcast?" So he starts going into all the dialogue of the sex podcast, telling me everything that happened on the sex podcast. He talked about Father Brian's story about the coffin and all these different stories that happened during the podcast. And I'm like, "Will, do your parents know that you listen to this?" He's like, "No, I'm not crazy. I'm not going to tell my parents, but I just had to tell you, I love the podcast. It was awesome." So at that point, I was like, "Listen, you shouldn't be listening to that stuff. That's for adults only. Please don't listen again." And I remember getting out of the car that day, driving home. I told my wife, I'm like, "Man, I can't be doing sex podcasts anymore. I got 10-year-old kids in town listening to me." And that just kind of freaked me out. So that's one of the reasons why I kind of stopped doing those. Yeah, exactly, Mel. I was horrified. I was like, holy crap. Luckily, out of all the kids in town, his parents are super cool. And even if they knew, they would laugh about it. But still, that kind of was a little bit of a defining moment for me, as to maybe I shouldn't be doing those shows anymore. So I kind of stopped doing them. But just funny story, my podcast.
Yeah, I know we always would get very, very rattled when we would have someone come in and say that they were 12 or something on Random Couple Show. Even if the topic has to be really clean at the time, we're just like, "Oh God, go to bed." I don't know, leave.
Go listen to something else. Go watch YouTube. Don't listen to the show. Get the hell out of here. One of those things.
I think at one time everybody laughed at me because the kid said he was 14 and he just wasn't responding to being polite, and I'm like, "You get the fuck off the show right the fuck now. I'm calling your parents." And the kid's like, "Holy," and leaves, and they're like, "Glenn, you just cussed out a 14-year-old." I'm like, "Well, shit. We're trying to have a sex talk here. We can't have him here."
Well, that's what had this kid, after I told him not to listen to the show anymore, I kept driving him around for the next few weeks, and he'd get into my car and he was trying to be like Howard Stern with me in the car. Like we have this little rubber duck. My daughter found it at the beach one day. We went to the beach, just found it in the sand. We're like, "Oh, let's take it." So we took the little rubber duck, it fits in the palm of your hand. It's tiny. So that day I just put it on my dashboard in the car, and it stayed there ever since. It's been 3 years. So this kid gets in my car. Okay, he sits down, and this is after he listened to my show, and he's like, "Oh," and this, his audience is in the car with him, the other 4 kids. He's just like, "Oh, Coach DiVito, I got to tell you, I am so fucking horny right now." And I was like, "Dude, what did you say?" He goes, "Yeah, see that duck up there? I want to fuck that duck." And I remember,
God,
I tried to yell at him, but I laughed in the middle of it because I was just caught me by so surprised. I was like, "Holy crap!" I'm like, "Will, you can't talk like that in my car." So finally, I couldn't figure out what to do. I didn't want to tell his parents because then he'd get killed. So I said to him the next day, I just said, "Hey, listen, your father asked me how you've been behaving in my car," which he didn't. And I said, I did give him a positive report, but if the nasty language continues, I'm going to have to tell you, Dad. So at that point, he's been like a perfect soldier every time I've driven him around since then. But he came up with that, and I was just like, holy shit, I like corrupted this whole group of kids by my stupid show. But anyway, that's I don't know. That was funny though. I mean, again, I can't look at the duck the same way. It's still on my dashboard now. I may have to post a picture of that duck on Instagram and Twitter so you guys can see it's still up on the thing. But he kind of soiled that duck, I guess, forever by talking about it. But hey,
so John,
yeah, go ahead.
I have one question about that. So yeah. I mean, at that point, did you think, well, shit, maybe I should have used my real name for the podcast show? It made it really easy to search.
If I went back again in the beginning, I probably would have started it without my name. That was one of those decisions where literally, like, I'm a person that doesn't think about things. I just do things. So I remember I was thinking about doing a podcast, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll do one. So I looked on Podbean. I'm like, oh, you can do this live. That's kind of cool. I signed up in like a 10-minute span, put in my money, paid for a year, and I signed it up as the John DiVito Show. So now I guess if I change the name of that show, it's going to screw up all the different feeds and things like that. So I've actually thought, but if I could go back in time right now, I would have signed up with another name and not use my name, definitely, because, then everyone knows who you are and they can search it and all that type of thing. But I think I'm too far into it now, so I'm going to probably just stick with the name, and who knows, at some point.
I'm not sure that's factual, John. I'm pretty sure if you change the name of the podcast, that this kind of the next time you distribute your episode, the name would kind of be changed.
Would it just change?
Unless you distribute it. Did you distribute through Podbean or on your own?
I do. I distribute through Podbean. So when I publish a show through Podbean, it goes out to all the different platforms, like iHeartRadio, etc.
Yeah, but shouldn't that change the name at the same time?
I guess it might. I should look into that because I've been thinking about doing it for a while. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of bored with it being called the John DiVito Show. So I've thought about it. Yeah, it's a good idea, Chess Doc. Maybe I should just change my real name. That's not a bad idea. I'm going to change my name to Glenn. I'm going to be Glike Beldner. That's going to be my new name. So I'm going to just go with that around town.
Solid choice.
Yeah, I think so. Glike Beldner. So, all right. Hey, we got a few more questions. We're getting up on an hour. I like to keep these around an hour. Then people tend to listen to them on download. If you go too long, I think people get scared away. But one question I've asked everybody: do you have any pet peeves about people, about life, about anything really?
Do I? You're going to need another hour for this, John.
Bring them. I knew you'd have some of these ready to go.
Pet peeves, work related, because I live in the prairies. I get really annoyed when I have someone come back and ask me if the salmon is fresh or frozen. And my first thought every time is, do you see the fucking ocean? I don't know. I don't, but whatever. That would be one. What else is a pet peeve? People that leave the freaking door open in the middle of winter. That's horribly annoying. I don't know why people do it. It's like it's -20 out, and they decide that because they decide to run around a little bit, that they should leave the door open for air conditioning. It's like, no, piss off.
That happens to my door 5 times a day at least. It's just like, guys, it's like 25 degrees out. Close the damn door. It's freezing out.
Yeah, it's like tell you when you pay the heating bill, you understand what I'm talking about. Close the damn door.
Exactly. I say it all the time. Close the damn door. It's freezing.
Live casting wise, I always get annoyed with my co-host on Random Couple Show for responding to comments without reading the comment, because it makes absolutely no sense in post. That always bugged the shit out of me. I would have to, for whatever reason, I have to kind of go away for 10 minutes, and I'm like, and read the comments. And so I'll come back. She's like, sorry, I didn't read any comments. God damn it.
So you guys were dating and you had this show. Now, did you still do the show after you stopped dating, or was that the end of the show between the two of you also?
The show ended before we stopped dating, so that ended first. She took it more on the chin with that show than I did. I mean, I have a fairly thick skin, and I just kind of laugh it off, and it doesn't really bug me that much. I mean, you can say whatever you want. I really don't care. If it's good, I'll give you props on it and say that was solid. And if it's not, I'm just gonna tell you that's just not funny. Sorry, buddy. But she didn't really respond to the pokes as well as I did. So the show, how the show ended with just everybody kind of taking runs at us, that was hard on her mentally, and I just wasn't very supportive because I was too worried about my own game plans and whatnot. So and when it ended, and the relationship kind of went down with it eventually. But that wasn't right off the bat anyway.
Now, the same thing happened to me in my shows. I mean, I've had people come in, dumping on me, dumping on my kids, bringing in my kids' names in as screen names, dumping on my wife and, whatever. It's one of those things where I look at it, it kind of annoys me. But honestly, if you really have to spend your life by coming into Podbean and creating fake little names to upset people, dude, you really need to take a look in the mirror and reevaluate your life choices. Because if that's at the top of your priority list where you need to be a troll on a podcast, it is what it is, but take a look in the mirror and figure out what went wrong in your life, because to me it's just kind of a stupid waste of time. But it's too bad that that happened for you guys, because I the few times I was able to listen, your show was always on late. I never got to listen for that reason, because I go to bed pretty early, unfortunately. But the times I listened to your show, it was a great show. I enjoyed it when I was in there and really enjoyed it. And I've listened to your sports show a few times also. And I'm not as much a hockey fan, and you guys do talk hockey quite a bit, but you guys do a really good job. I mean, how can people find your sports show? Because you're not going live. You're just kind of publishing out to the different platforms. Like, what platforms can they find you?
We're pretty much wherever you find podcasts at this point, except Pandora, because fuck Pandora, those are these assholes. But we're pretty much everywhere. Apple, Google, doesn't really matter. For ease, it's Glenn and Mike smashed together, and it's a very original name. So Glike, no spaces. Put that in your search engine wherever you find podcasts, and we should be the first thing that pops up.
Yeah, what's up with Pandora? You mentioned that. They won't approve me. Is it because you have to have 500,000 downloads or something to that effect? Because that is the one platform that has not accepted my show.
Essentially, yeah. You need a few thousand downloads per episode. You need to have ad revenue coming in, because Pandora obviously wants to get a little cut of that. They want to get a piece of your pie as well. And so, yeah, it's just, there's 95,000 things that they want. They want you to have all these downloads, this and that, and, be listened to by millions worldwide, essentially. And it's that's not me. Or have a big corporation behind you.
That's never going to be me. So I guess I'll never be on Pandora. That's okay. I'm fine with that. Fuck Pandora.
Well, Pandora sounds like they have too high of expectations. So we're probably better off saying forget Pandora, or if you prefer to go blunt and say F Pandora altogether.
Hey, don't worry, Eric. I have an explicit so you can say fuck. It's okay. I knew that Glenn would be on there, so I made it explicit.
But I think y'all are also on Amazon Music podcast as well.
Am I? Or is Glenn on that? Is Glenn on Amazon?
I think we both are, probably.
I don't even know. I don't even know which one's on.
Well, you gotta probably check just to be sure.
Yeah. So, Eric, do you have any questions for Glenn? Because I get a few more for him. But I think you've been sitting.
Well, can't think of anything else. But hopefully, the Glike Beldner Sports Show hopefully grows bigger in the new year.
That's the hope. It's not primarily hosted by Podbean anymore, so it's doing really well outside of Podbean. Podbean's kind of just Podbean at this point. It's not that
right.
Are you recording on Podbean, or are you recording someplace else?
We had been recording on Podbean, but due to some network issues, as a pre-recorded show, there's a little more editing that goes into it, because we do take breaks just to pee or whatever we need to do. So we just kind of mute, so then I have to cut out the 5-10 minutes of dead. But then I'd have in one episode, I basically had to just trash it, because every 30 seconds I was missing 10 seconds, and it made absolutely no sense. So I just kind of trashed that one. So I'm looking at recording in the future on Audacity, and then just publishing it that way. And that way I can record offline, and I'm not needing to concern myself what happens if the internet decides to go a little wonky for 10 seconds and this and that. So,
right.
But as of right now, we have been using. Sorry, Eric, go ahead.
I mean, another question is, could Glike Beldner Sports Show maybe expand to like a video platform if, say, you and Mike are comfortable showing y'all's faces, whether it's YouTube, D Live, Twitch, and other video platforms?
Eric, we want to keep our listeners, not scare them away. So we will probably try to stick to audio.
I don't want to show my face.
So y'all just keep it audio only?
Probably. Maybe we'll come out with a 2-minute clip here once in a while or something. I know I did start a YouTube channel just to kind of throw all my tweezer clips out there, and I put a few up there. So there's a Glike Beldner Sports Show YouTube, but I really don't think it's probably going to turn into an audio platform anytime in the near future.
Or a video platform, you mean?
Where we, yeah, that's what I mean. I'm not sure what I said, but I obviously said the wrong thing. So yeah, I can't see it turning into video anytime soon, unless for whatever reason we seem to have like a whole bunch of money to put into like building ourselves a studio with kind of like a cool setup or whatever in the background. As of right now, we record at Mike's house, and he doesn't like particularly showing off the pigsty he lives in, so we don't do video.
I actually got a YouTube page up and running, and I publish to it, but it's not video. They're just all audio files. So I did check my YouTube page the other day. I have my own channel, and I'm very proud to say that I have 0 subscribers. So we're getting big over here with the John DiVito Show. 0 subscribers. I'm on my way. So if any of you wants to be my first, I would appreciate it, since I don't have that big 0 by my name on my YouTube channel. But yeah, same thing with me. I was thinking about doing a video, but if I do a video, I'm going to do the same as I do on my work Zoom calls. I'll wear a shirt but no pants, and I find that to be kind of a funny way to keep things real, on my work conference calls, hoping that no one's gonna ask me to actually stand up during the call and do anything.
Oh, you know what they say, John? With those things, you got dressed to impress on the top and dress for comfort on the bottom.
Exactly. Well, it's funny. I did that for an interview once. I was interviewing with a company a few years ago, and I literally had the shirt and tie on, doing whatever it was, Zoom or whatever meeting it was. So I had the shirt and the tie on, and I literally wore shorts down in the bottom, figuring I'd be sitting down in front of the computer interviewing. Didn't feel like putting my work pants on. So literally, I get on to the work interview, and the interviewer is standing up, and I'm just like inside my head, I'm like, oh fuck, because I was expecting him to. So I just sat down. I did not get up, and after like 5 minutes, he just sat down. So he kind of gave up on the fact that he was standing up, but I was not about to stand up and reveal I had shorts on from the waist down, which would have been probably kind of funny. I probably wouldn't have gotten the job, which wouldn't have been a bad thing, because I ended up getting that job, and then I quit without a job a year later because I hated that job. So I probably, in retrospect, should have stood up and shown that I had shorts on, and I wouldn't have never gone down that road. But hey, I got a couple more questions I want to ask you. All right, this is one I've asked everybody. If you could have dinner with someone dead or alive, who would it be?
Dead or alive? Who would it be?
Anybody.
That's a tough one. There's a pretty long list of those ones.
If you want to throw in a couple, you can. You don't have to limit it to one.
I would have to say probably Babe Ruth would have to be one, because I'd have to find out if he was surprised when the ball went where he pointed to. Because I mean, I can't imagine that he really thought that was going to work out for him that way.
That's awesome.
That'd be one.
I love that.
Who else? Ted Kennedy, because I want to find out who he actually was enemies with. Or JFK, sorry.
Oh, JFK. What? Ted Kennedy wouldn't be bad either. You could actually ask him what really happened to Chappaquiddick way back when, back in the day. But JFK, you could find out what happened. If JFK even knew, he might not have known,
I mean, because there's many conspiracy theories that he was aligned with some not nice people or something too. So I mean, I'm just curious, like, do any of the conspiracies have anything to do with anything or not? I don't know. I mean, there are so many people that would be like great to like even just like sit down and have a beer with, or if you get like a truth serum too.
That'd be awesome.
If you could sit down and like give a truth serum to like any person in the world, alive or dead, and so for the next 5 minutes they can tell you nothing but the exact truth, like who would you talk to?
That'd be a good question. I mean, there's so many people you could talk to. I mean, about government conspiracies, about everything. I mean, there's so many different people you could have on that list. I've always said like one person I'd like to speak to would be like Abraham Lincoln would be one. He's always a guy that I've always admired. Obviously, just a great president. For family members, I've had like my mother would be someone on the list. And I'll tell you, I still think my favorite out of anybody's answer yet, this is something I wouldn't have thought of probably in my top 20 guesses or even more, was Cummings' Culture was the first interview I did. And he came out with almost immediately. I asked him this question and he was like point blank in like 1 second. He said, Jesus Christ. And I thought about that for a second. And then he started to explain it. He goes, think about it. If you could interview Jesus, you could find the answers to everything. And I'm like, you know what? That is one damn good, one damn good suggestion. I wouldn't have thought about it. It's true. You could, pretty much ask anything and know the answers. if that was the case. So I don't know. So what are the type of things you got going on? I mean, like I've got other questions like, what type of music do you listen to? Things like that. Or are there anything in particular you really like? Like, are you a rock guy? What do you like for bands?
I'm kind of I guess probably more of a heavy metal guy. I listen to a lot of German metal, so I like Rammstein, Oomph. I like a lot of German bands. I also like kind of some obscure bands. So this
Let
is
me ask you, let me stop you
Swedish.
right there. Tell me about Rammstein. Now, is that an older band?
They've been around since I think the early '90s, if I remember
Okay.
correctly. I think they've been around since the early '90s.
They play in the
Even
US,
when they,
don't they?
I don't. I think they're banned in the U.S. Honestly, I don't think they come to the U.S. They hate America.
Okay, because I've heard that band before. I've heard the name before. Hey, look who Father
They,
Brian's
they,
in. See ya. Father Brian's in.
they have a song called America, and the English lyrics and the video are not really that nice to America. Oh, speaking of Father Brian,
You
we
did.
do have
You
a
were just talking
segment.
about Father Brian.
Speaking of Father Brian, for the last about 6 or 7 episodes of the Glike Beldner Sports Show, and Brian being one of our primary listeners and comments all the time, we actually finished the show with a segment called Things Father Brian Said. Now sponsored by Planet ADHD with Mother Rebecca and Father Brian.
Nice. Yeah, Father Brian, just so you know, I was chatting back and forth with Glenn last night, just kind of finalizing all this stuff. And he was saying, number one, your show, Planet ADHD, is one of the best, if not the best on Podbean, one of his very favorites. And I'd like to get in more than I do. But, Father Brian, we got to nail an interview with you. We got to get you down and get you and Rebecca into the show so we can interview you about your show also. Because we get a lot of good people. Yeah, and it was funny. We were just talking about you a little bit earlier about your show and just kind of going back and forth about it a little bit. So you missed all that. You can listen to it on download if you want to hear what we said. Nothing bad though, I don't think. Maybe a couple things, but
We
not too
didn't
many.
say anything bad. You mentioned your sex show and Brian's story
That's right.
about
Well,
the
Brian,
coffin. That's
Brian,
like the last Brian reference, really.
Yeah, Brian. Yeah, I'll make it real quick. But I stopped doing the sex shows because I had a young 11-year-old kid who's a friend of my son's in the car, and he was listening to my sex podcast, and he told the story about the coffin to all the other kids in the car. So at that point, I'm like, all right, need to put the brakes on those shows a little bit for the time being. So, all right, man. Well, listen, we're over an hour. Is there anything else you want to say about your shows, about yourself? Anything we may have forgotten to talk about? If so, this is your chance to let it rip.
So I have a new shtick on Podbean now that I'm not live. I am the head, the founder, and the only employee of Glenn's amateur legal consulting firm. It may not be real, but neither are the problems it deals with. So I have the Turfy Show with Mary and John as clients right now, and of course Brian and Rebecca at Planet ADHD. So that's fun. I go around with my fictitious legal consulting firm account and have fun and add disclaimers for people where needed and allegedly and adamantly deny allegations. And so I just use fancy lawyer talk and have fun with that.
That sounds like that you have people like writing in or giving you circumstances where they need help, or you just kind of coming up with that stuff on your own.
Well, for one, Brian's mouth can be very dangerous sometimes. So a lot of the time on Planet HD, he says stuff where I feel like he could really use a disclaimer for what he means because what he said didn't sound quite right. So like he'll like have a sentence where he goes, "Kids, I'm telling you, I was popping Xanax like Skittles," and I'm like, disclaimer. He does not encourage kids to start eating Xanax like Skittles.
Well, maybe you can help me with the legal problem I have. You think you can help me out? I could maybe give it to you right now before we get off today. I was actually
Absolutely.
All right. I was in my house showering about a week ago, and this woman, one of our neighbors, took it upon herself to come into our house. And I don't know why she came in, but she felt like she knew us well enough where she could, come into the house and ask us, I think, for sugar or whatever she was looking for. So she ended up going upstairs looking for me. And I was at the exact time I was coming out of the shower. Now I had gotten out. It was pretty cold in the house. And I kind of had that thing going on, the whole Seinfeld thing with Shrinkage. Well, apparently she witnessed
Oh.
the shrinkage and then told everybody in the neighborhood and posted something about my shrinkage on Facebook. And now I'm kind of humiliated where people think that I am not all what I should be. So is there anything legally I can do to maybe go after her for allegedly putting things out there, talking about my shrinkage to the population and kind of affecting my, my reputation?
Well, one, I would say that is definitely defamation of package. That is definitely defamation of package. She should not be going around about that. But I'm thinking that your wife will be, yes, will adamantly deny the fact that John's wiener was is significantly smaller than than it should be. Something like that. We'll have to work on the wording.
I mean, I'm like every man. When a woman asks, what size is your penis, I always add a couple inches on, like every other man does. You're not going to come out and give the true size.
No, actually, John, I go the other way. I always knock off a couple inches because if they still say yes, they're going to be thoroughly impressed.
And plus, you don't want to scare them away, also, right? Because I've heard that about you. I've heard that Glenn's got some shit going on, so that's impressive. Now, unfortunately, in my town, everyone thinks that what she saw in that cold state was, really me, and it's not. So I'm glad you could help me with that legally. I may have to.
But John, I have a conspiracy theory to this. A conspiracy theory is your wife is a little concerned that as you're getting older, you're starting to be like a fine red wine, and you're starting to look a little better. So she went to the neighbor lady saying, I'm worried that some of these other more scantily neighbor ladies are going to want to sneak a peek of what John's working with and maybe take it for a run. Wow. And so she went to the neighbor lady and said, hey, I know John's having a shower, walk into my house, maybe catch him and say a few things to make sure those other neighbor ladies, leave the cork on that bottle of wine, so to speak.
Interesting, because now that I think about it, one of the other women across the way got involved in this as well. So the neighbor lady could have been the one starting the conspiracy theory, but the woman across the street could have been my I guess equivalent of the grassy knoll also. So I didn't even think of this. So we could have kind of a conspiracy going where they're looking to put me down. And me, that's true about you. You can't lie to a nurse or a doctor. My wife's a doctor. You're a nurse. I mean, most nurses and doctors have seen more penises than prostitutes, because that's kind of what you do all day long. My wife looks at penises all day long, so I can't lie to her anymore. But that's interesting about the conspiracy. That could be what it is. So I may have
As someone that had to get a catheter once in my life, there is nothing worse to when you have to get the catheter and all of a sudden you find out it's a nurse that looks really nice that's doing it. It's like, oh, come on, it's a grower. Come on, whatever.
Well, that's why, when that happens, though, you're in that scenario, you have to wait for the nurse to leave the room, and then you have to flip it a couple of times to at least make it look respectful, kind of get in one of those situations where you're kind of halfway. So, she may think that that's actually how it is normally. So, that's the thing you have to work on also. But it's true, man. There are growers and showers, and I think it's all about, where you get in the end. So, and look at Mother Rebecca enter the studio. She's and now Father Brian and Mother Rebecca, while I have you guys in here, do you want to do an interview? I'd like to have you both on, so I can interview the both of you as well. And if so, let me know, because I'm sorry, Jess, we went off the rails a little bit here, but I knew that was going to happen with Glenn. But I'm going to write you so I get some legal help, because I have to kind of revamp my reputation.
I always get accused of being the reason why it went off the rails. I don't know why people don't realize that they're degenerates too, and they can go off the rails just as easily as I do.
Well, I'm definitely a degenerate, but I know that you helped me become a degenerate, or you helped me go off the rails, which I always like about you. But there's no doubt I'm a degenerate. That's a definite. So,
I even as Brian's legal consultant, he's like, like you're a horrible legal consultant sometimes. Half the time, you like walk me into an issue that you then decide to charge me for later.
Oh my God! Now
it's like it's like if I was a real lawyer, I'm the guy that's like, hey Brian, see that guy over there? Go punch him in the face. He's like, all right, I'll go punch him in the face. He goes, punch him in the face. He gets arrested, gets thrown in jail. I show up as a lawyer. All right, Brian, so it's going to cost you $1,000 this time around. You told me to punch him. Yeah, and now I'm telling you that it's going to cost you $1,000.
Have you ever seen the show Better Call Saul?
Yes, great show.
Did you see the episode where he was doing that? He was literally going around into the ghetto, handing out business cards and telling all the criminals it was like a 50% off deal on his legal services. So then you had all the criminals running around town like armed robbery, attacking people, breaking into houses, everything else. And they were going to him for the discount on his legal fees to get him out of jail. It was freaking hysterical. I love that show. Funny show.
Oh, yeah. It's a great idea. I know Mother Rebecca and Father Brian at one time got a little annoyed with me because they have their little boy who was cute as a button and was a lot of the time talking during the show, but he was up to shenanigans, and I decided, as being the lawyer in the house, that I would take his side. And they're like, "Is this not a conflict of interest?" And I'm like, "This shit isn't real. You can't accuse me of that."
That's right. You can set the rules. This is your deal. You can do whatever you want.
Exactly.
Now, Meee, if you're still here, now for those of you that don't know, I'm doing 2 interviews today. So I had Glenn today at 12 and 7 o'clock Eastern time for you West Coast people. That's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're going to be resuming the talk about shrinkage and penis size. Meee comes on at 7 o'clock tonight, since she's a nurse.
Shouldn't you flip the time slots, John? Though, shouldn't you have done the daytime show with someone that was way less likely to throw you off the rails into talking about your penis than the person, and have the night show with the person that is more likely to get you talking about your penis?
I can see it now. 3 weeks from now, I'm going to be in the car driving my kid to baseball, and this other kid's going to be sitting in the back seat again going, "Hey, Mr. DiVito, I heard about your shrinkage." Yeah, that's right. Keep your mouth shut and get in the back seat, or I'm going to tell your father. So I don't know. Yeah,
John, the worst part is if he decides to go look up random couple shows somewhere, there is some shows that are even worse than anything you've talked about.
Well, you had some good shows. There's no doubt about it. So now I imagine that people can still search random couple shows and see your published shows. If you guys haven't listened to those
it's
shows,
anywhere except Podbean. It's everywhere except Podbean at this point. Podbean, when I deleted my account, deleted random couple shows from existence on Podbean.
Really?
But it is still, if you delete your account, they over the next few days, they just basically make your podcast go away. Can't even search it anymore. But it's still available on Spotify and iHeart and Deezer and places like that. So not Apple and Google, because I had issues trying to distribute to them when I was still learning how to do this.
Right. All right. Well, listen, we're way over time. I got to get back to work actually, but I want to thank you for coming on, man. You're a friend. I love talking to you back and forth when we get the chance. And you've been someone that,
thanks, Sean.
Right from the very beginning, has always been someone that listened to my show, and I know some of the things I talk about aren't always up your alley, but you're always a good guy checking in and stuff like that. So I always appreciate that. So thank you for coming on, and hopefully everyone will get a chance to go out and listen to the the Glike Beldner show and random couple shows and all that good stuff. And yeah, I'm getting afraid. I'm watching the chat. I'm seeing Meee.
I have one more thing, John.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I told you about my son. So my son, having over the last year noticed me doing podcasting and being told no, he can't be a YouTuber, now actually does have a podcast.
Oh.
And being a cop, he has walkie-talkies, so he'll go out patrolling, and I'll be his dispatch, and now that's kind of become his podcast.
No way.
So it's like this 9-year-old on patrol calling in dispatch, "Dispatch, this is 10-8. Do you copy?" That kind of stuff. So, and I actually got Brian to do this Law and Order thing for him. So I took it's probably copyrighted, but whatever. But I took the Law and Order theme music, and I got Brian to do the voice for him saying, "Preteen Cop Patrol is taken very seriously in the city which Officer Cameron resides. He's a leader among them, and these are real-time accounts of his patrol." And so now I have that as the intro. But anyway, you guys could find that wherever you find podcasts. It's called Conversation with Cameron. It is 100% child friendly because it is a 9-year-old's podcast. And he decided that it is brought to you by stinkydad.ca, which currently does not exist, but it will in the future.
That sounds awesome. Good for you. You sound like a great dad, man. That's awesome. You do that with him and kind of create those memories along with him. That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. So, all right, man. Well, listen, Eric, do you want to do the rundown of all the other shows coming up?
Well,
me today at 7 o'clock, also Eastern time.
So 7 p.m. Eastern. John DiVito has, me in his latest installment of the Get to Know Your Podcaster interview, and then later in the week we're going to have Robert on Thursday from the Mr. Clean podcast, and we're going to have Taz on Friday. But we're hoping we can get Brian and Rebecca to also come in sometime to do a Get to Know Your Podcaster interview, and we still want to try to get a hold of Cracks from the Talking Corner podcast, which is part of the Exotics radio platform that she's evolved into. And then we'd like to also get Ralph William on as well.
Yeah, I got to get in and ask him. I haven't asked him yet. I've been into his show a few times, but I think I'm going to probably limit the podcast to this week, and then next week I'm going to go back to just doing a regular show, just because I've done a lot of interviews. But I will be doing these again at some point.
But maybe you might resume it in January, I would guess.
Yeah, I'm going to take a little break and go back to regular shows for a couple of weeks and then start scheduling interviews again, just so it doesn't get to be too many interviews in a row, But I'm really enjoying getting to know different people and getting to know all the different shows. And hopefully it's helping all of you get to know the podcasters a little bit more. And so we're all just kind of a little bit more comfortable with each other. So, all right, I didn't mean to interrupt.
But, well, I know, and then the Slightly Serious show is on tonight at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. And then we know Robert will have another Mr. Clean Music show late night tonight. And then Ralph William, he's on at 6 a.m. Eastern, 3 a.m. Pacific. And then the Chit Chat with the Old Man show is on at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific with me, the Old Man, and Dean Joe. And occasionally we might get a visit from Grammy, and we might even get Asha from the Man Cave Sound podcast and Cracks and Crazy Kane also, visit the show and a few others. And then Lara is on, impromptu with the communication station. And then Meee also does a great job with her A Day in the Life of Me podcast. And then also be on the lookout for Just Another Day in Paradise, Dreadnought 928 impromptu episodes of VOP USA Radio. And then The Holy Shift with Poetic. And then David has Mysteries of the Paranormal on Friday nights. And then Mel, E, John, and Mike do Lyrical Laxatives on Saturday evenings. And Trice Talk and the Tall Tales in the Rabbit Hole with Donald Wayne and Dennis Lee. And, a lot of great podcasts on here. So, but I'll, see you later this evening, John.
All right, guys. Yeah, we'll see you later on tonight. Thank you, Eric, for helping out.
And we'll see me later. And hopefully Robert and Slightly might drop by.
That'd be good. And hey, Glenn, again, thank you very much for coming on the show. I know he dropped off the call. Glenn's a great guy. If you haven't listened to his shows, check him out. And me, I will see you tonight, so be ready. And now that I've seen a little bit more about your personality, I may have to write down some additional questions. So we're going to be ready, Meee. You never know what's going to come at you. All right, guys, love you all. Have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.
Love you and God bless. We'll see you later.
Yes, I did that on purpose.
Merry Christmas. Ho, 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 ho.
Oh, hell no.